Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Mahmoud. I am software architect in Cariad, which is an automotive software company of the Volkswagen Group. I have 7 years plus of experience in software development. I also have a master's in automotive software engineering from TU Chemnitz. I basically did not start my career in software development. I started in telecommunication as I have bachelor in telecommunication, and I started working in that field for 2 years in Jordan, and then I realized that this is bringing no career in the future. That's why I basically decided to change my career, which was a very hard decision. And today I'm going to tell you kind of 4 stories that I've experienced that I think they, let's say, shaped the place where I am in, and I think you can also benefit from them. So the first story is basically coming to Germany. I wanted to always come to Germany. Of course, it's hard. Some of you already faced that situation. I'm not going to tell how hard that was. You are already in the situation. But to change from a place where you are known, where your family are, where you have a job, to a place where you need to study, you don't have any, let's say, 100% source of living. That's basically hard. That was really not that easy. So I decided to come to Germany, and I got an admission in TU Chemnitz to study masters in telecommunication engineering. And in the first 2 months, basically, I realized that this is going to take too long, and the jobs. So talking to the colleagues and to the seniors, I realized that this is going to take too much to basically get a job afterwards, and also it's going to take too much to finish that program. And then a couple of the colleagues advised me to switch to automotive software engineering, which was another program in TU Chemnitz, and this is what I decided to do. And from this point, I'd like to say that you need to be dynamic. So the market is changing. If you stick to what you are doing, then after some time, if you are not in the right position, you will find yourself without a job. And luckily, this field was really demanding in Germany, and especially in Germany, to do software in automotive. This is really demanding, and you can see the market today and 5 years ago, and I think this is also going to increase more and more in the coming years. And that is basically the point that I decided to change my major and go to the automotive software engineering, and which I was basically lucky to do in the time of the university. Some of my colleagues did it after finishing the masters. They decided to find a job in automotive. That was a little bit late, but still you need to be dynamic, otherwise you cannot find basically something that basically let you earn enough money basically. So that was the first story that I wanted to tell. The second story is that during this master program, I had the option to make practicum. I did apply for around, I don't know, 50 applications, and I did not get any reply, because my experience was in telecommunication. For the colleagues who did something in software, they are lucky. So before they came to Germany, they were lucky and they got good options. For me, I was not that lucky, but then I talked to one of my professors and I asked him for recommendation, and basically he helped me making the first contact to the industry. And this is always the hardest part, to make your first contact in the industry, and you need to work on this as early as possible. If you postpone it to after graduation, or maybe working couple of years in research, that would be very hard to jump to the industry. That's going to be an advice to you. Try to switch to industry as early as possible, in practicum, in student job, or something like that. That would be the perfect time to switch to industry. The more you delay it, the harder it's going to be. So I got a recommendation from my professor, or basically he recommended me to some of the employers in some companies, specifically in Daimler. He gave my name to some of his colleagues in Daimler, and then based on that I got my practicum position in Daimler, and that was really something that basically changed my career. Uh, and my advice again is to try to go to the industry as early as possible, even though it is going to require that you change the city, you change the community. You need to do that, otherwise it's going to be very hard afterwards. Then I did my practicum. During my practicum, I started to apply for basically master thesis, and in that basically I had couple of options. One of them was in Daimler, but I knew during my time that it's very hard to find a position afterwards, because you don't have to look for the position that you are in. Now you need to look a little bit further to find your start, or your first permanent job. And the perfect situation would be that you try to find a company in the time of study where you can continue your professional career in without needing to shift again. And that was also my experience. I knew that it will be very hard to find a permanent job in Daimler at that point of time with my little German experience. So I decided to leave Daimler, although I basically had a position from them to make my master, and of course I will get a little bit more money, but I will suffer afterwards because they will not offer a permanent job, and then I have to research again, and that was something that I wanted to avoid. And therefore I went to another option, which is Electrobit. It was a company that is known that the communication language is Electrobit, and it's good in software development. It's not an OEM, and basically the OEMs are not the best place to start your career as software development. You will learn a lot of things, but not very much about software development and coding specifically, and that's why I went to Electrobit, and that was, so far as I think now, a very good and right decision, because after doing my master thesis I got an offer to continue basically my first permanent job in there. And this is the thing that is basically you need to look for always. You always need to orient yourself to find your first permanent job. That is the most important thing. After that, switching between jobs is going to be very easy, but to find the first one as a foreigner or as an international in Germany is really hard if you don't have a really good experience. And from that point on, you need to, so before you get your first job, the target for you should be to get your first job. But after getting the first job, then you need to change the target, and you need to make it as building the experience as much as you can. The bigger experience you build, the more options and the more opportunities you get afterwards. And from that point, I started in Electrobit as basically a master thesis student, and then a software engineer, and then I became a senior software engineer, and then in parallel I became a system software architect and also lead developer, because I tried to take the chance from everyone I met there to build up my software knowledge. That should be the target. You cannot say that I cannot do that, let someone else do it. You need to learn as much as possible. Our field is really dynamic. You cannot just say I know coding, that's enough, because software development is not only about coding. It's about too many things. It's about tools. You need to know the tools. You need to know the advantages and disadvantages of tools, even though you might not have to work with every single tool. You need to know why you use Visual Studio, why you use Visual Code, ADTF, and PyCharm, Eclipse. You need to know at least the advantages and the disadvantages. If you prefer a tool, for example, we are talking about IDEs here, you need to know why you prefer it and why you don't use something else, because these kind of things will make your knowledge robust. You basically know why you're using the tool, not because it's just the only option or just the colleagues of you are using it now. And yeah, that is something you need to orient yourself to gain as much experience as possible. And one tip that I basically can mention here, that I saw some colleagues joining company for 2 years and then leaving. In 2 years, at least from my point of view, you can learn not that much things in software development. In my situation, I stayed 5 years in the same company, changing from project to a project, from a tool to a tool, from a process to another process, to gain as much experience as possible in one place. And when I left, I was kind of known by so many people in the company, and that was something that basically come by time and by experience. If you keep changing, you don't build a real experience. That is basically from my point of view. And you can also, this is a tip that you can take it or leave it, but for me it was really important. Don't leave your first company if you are comfortable with the work and with the colleagues just because of the salary. If you are not comfortable with the work, if you are working, for example, as tester, and you want to work in development and you get a better option, yeah, that's a really good reason to move from one company to another company. Or if the atmosphere is really not that good, yeah, that might be. But if you learn a lot in that company and it's the field that you like to continue the rest of your career in, then basically don't move for salary or for any kind of reasons like that. That's my advice. That's why I stayed 5 years in Electrobit, and I basically climbed the stairs step by step till the point that I felt a little bit comfortable that I want to switch. And another important point that I realized, that here in Germany, if you don't become a senior software engineer in the first company, so if you stayed 2 years, for example, then you switched for another company for 2 years, at the end of 2 years, it's hardly that they are going to let you become a senior. However, if you stay for 4 or 5 years in one company, then you become a senior. So my advice is that don't leave your first company unless you become a senior, because that's a very important word and it brings you to another level. And if you switch if you switch after 2 or 3 years, for example, to another company, then they don't give you a senior after 2 or 3 years. They are going to give you, okay, just wait for another 4 or 5 years. So at the end, you need kind of a 5 years block. Maybe some other colleagues, they have different experience, but this is what I felt in my experience and in also some colleagues that I know. So try to find a block of 4 or 5 years in basically in one company till you become a senior. You make a real experience in software development, and then you can switch. And that's basically an advice that became or that basically I find really useful and I find basically important. And yeah, so After that, you can basically change the way that you negotiate with companies. If you are senior, then when you go to interviews, then you tell them, I'm senior, I want 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, points. If they are not there, yeah, I don't want to change. Yeah, the way, I mean, I remember that I went to one interview with a big company, international company, and I told them, if you are not going to give me basically this amount of money at least, then don't talk to me in this sound, in this way, because I know my experience, I know what I have. Then you put your conditions, not the other way around. Not as your first job, you need the first job. Your target is to work on the first job. So if you work on the targets as I explained, so the first target would be, you basically try to find the first job, and then during the first job the target is to build up real experience and to live with the situation that you are an expert or a senior. Then you can put your conditions afterwards. Yeah, so that is basically my advice to you. I would be happy to answer your questions about more details, what I'm actually doing now, and what tools basically I'm using if you want, and I would be happy to mentor you if you want. And I'm always open for questions, and also you can approach me via LinkedIn. And that's all. Thanks, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.